First, welcome and thank you all for joining us today. It's really great to see so many people who are joining us who are interested in learning more about a new pathway to medical school or advanced healthcare education and the Master of Science in Medical Sciences program. My name is Andy Jackson, and I'll be just participating to help guide the discussion this afternoon with our panel of experts. I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, great. So today we're really here to introduce the algorithm that better prepares and positions students like yourselves for a successful medical school application, as well as other professional health programs. Just a few quick housekeeping items before we get started. We are likely going to go for a full hour, but if we need extra time at the end for questions, we have reserved an additional 30 minutes. And speaking of questions, we would invite all attendees to post any questions that you have in the chat. We will be addressing as many of those questions as we can during the question and answer portion of the webinar. So to get us started, I would like to introduce Dr. David Lenahan. Dr. David Lenahan is the CEO of Tiber Health and currently serves as president at Ponce Health Sciences University. Dr. Lenahan is an experienced educator, innovator, and medical practitioner who has spent his career really committed to improving access to medical education for students of all backgrounds and income levels. So with that, David, if you want to say hello, introduce yourself, and then our panel of experts.
Sure. So I'm Dr. Lenahan. I'm the president, as you just heard, of Ponce Health Sciences University, which is a medical school in Puerto Rico. For those of you sorry about that. For those of you who don't know, Puerto Rico is part of the United States. We're part of the LCME schools, so we're just like University of Nebraska or Kansas. And we are now getting ready to build another campus in St. Louis. So we'll have 2 medical schools associated with this. Really excited to have this panel of experts with us. They represent some of the schools that we work with to help us identify students to come into our medical school. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we came about creating these analytics in a few minutes. But one of the things we really want to do is, how do we change the way we select students? How do we find students that are going to go back into areas where we have healthcare disparities in practice? And what you're going to hear through this discussion is, in order to solve some of these problems that we read about in the news or we probably talk about with our friends, we have to start figuring out methods to take students from those areas. And by what we kind of call moneyballing medicine, using analytics to select the students, we're going to talk you through how we go about doing that, how we use these analytics to help us predict which students we want to bring in this very competitive education pathway in medicine. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But before we get into that, I want to introduce our panel and ask them to say a few minutes with themselves, about themselves. So I'm going to start at the first one. So we'll ask Dr. Tatiana Tatum to tell us a little bit about herself and St. Xavier University. So Dr. Tatiana.
Hi. I want to say thank you to everybody who's joining us today and giving us a little bit of your time. I came into the program early on. I've been here since St. Xavier has had the program. We at St. Xavier is south side of Chicago. So when people say that they've heard, oh, we've heard about your school, I'm like, no, you've heard of Xavier that has a good basketball team. That is not us. So we're south side of Chicago. We are a HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution. We have a very high BIPOC population. So we have a lot of students who are first generation, who are minority students, and students who are going to make amazing doctors and healthcare professionals if they're given that opportunity. So when I was given the opportunity to let these students have that chance, I was like, yes, 100%, because these kids deserve it. They really do. And anything I can do to help them do that, I am behind. So that's where I am. I know that's where my moderators are. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that that's where Tiber and PHSU is. And I'm going to leave it there.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And next we have Dr. Wayne Muir from Jacksonville University. Sorry.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Wayne Muir. my background, I'm a registered respiratory therapist and registered pulmonary function technologist, and I worked in the hospital for many years in adult critical care and in diagnostics. I started doing education in cardiopulmonary department, and I really loved that, and decided I would teach respiratory therapy. And then I had the opportunity 7 years ago to come to Jacksonville University. We're in Jacksonville, Florida, which is Northeast Florida. The program, the MSMS program, is housed in our downtown location, and the Arlington campus is only about 8 miles away, right over the river. It sits right on the river, and we are very close to the beach, only 30 minutes from the beach, so we have that as well. And we just started our MSMS program last fall. And so we've admitted 2 cohorts, our first cohort of 16 and our second cohort we admitted in spring. And it's just been, as Dr. Tatum said, it's just been a joy working with students and working with them to kind of lay the path to where they want to go. You know, we have, I have 2 that want to be dentists. Most of them want to go into medicine. Few PAs, physician assistants, want to go to physician assistant school. So it's just a privilege and an honor to work with them and see how hard they work. I mean, they study every day. I mean, they're the hamster on the wheel. They just keep going. So, but thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Merritt. And next we have Dr. Rashad Corazon from Southern Cal. Cell Sciences.
Thank you for coming today. I second everything that the other panelists have just said. I'm from Southern California, raised went to school there, University of California, Irvine, undergrad and my doctorate degree. Our university is in the heart of Southern California. We're at the border of Los Angeles County and Orange County. So we're in the beautiful southern sunny parts of Southern California. My students in my program are as public health oriented, service centered as they can be. I'm very proud to say we are also one of the oldest chiropractic colleges in the United States. We are what was the former LACC, the Los Angeles College of Chiropractics. We also have a PA program at Southern California University of Health Sciences, an upcoming nursing program as well. So we're growing in beautiful and such important directions, and I'm very proud of my university. So that's, I'm also a fan of Disney. So any of my students, you cannot be from where I am from, which is Orange County, not be a fan of Disney. I know some of you are. So may the 4th be with you for those Star Wars fans. Before I say goodbye to you on that point, may the 4th be with you in this beautiful day.
Thank you, Dr. Corazon. And last but not least, of course, is Dr. Chad Osgood from Bethel University.
Hello all, thanks so much for having me have the opportunity to be a part of this great panel. I'm actually one of the newer people to the group, or our university is kind of the new kid on the block. We are actually launching our first cohort this coming fall. So we're super excited about the opportunity to interact with students that might be interested in coming to Bethel University. We are located technically in St. Paul, Minnesota, but we are an equal distance to Minneapolis as well. So kind of centrally located between the 2 cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I know many people talk about Florida and California as being absolutely beautiful, but Minnesota is a fantastic place as well. Ranks super high in terms of outdoor activities and quality of life. So I'm a big fan of being in Minnesota. I've lived here essentially my entire life. So my background is actually in athletic training and sports medicine. Did that for a number of years, and then transitioned about 4 or 5 years ago into a full administrative role. And like I said, we have just launched and got approval from the Higher Learning Commission to launch in the fall. So we are all set and ready to go, and excited to, like you on this panel, hear more about some of the analytics and what opportunities that's kind of created for people to get into medical school. And I'm here to answer any questions as somebody that's new to the team.
Thanks, Dr. Osgood. Well, thanks again for everyone for joining and answering some of the questions with the students. One of the things I want to take a few minutes on is talk about how we came about these models and why we did it. And I get asked this a lot, is why are you doing this? And because our mission is very unique and what we're trying to do. And I wish I could say I've had this lifelong process. This is what I wanted to do. But in reality, I kind of fell into it. And how it occurred was I was a professor of neurosurgery and neuroanatomy at Toro in Harlem. And I was commuting up there from St. Louis to teach and work. And I was teaching the brain, and I'll talk a little bit. I won't go too much in depth with this, but I was teaching the brain, and the brain's got this circle that sits underneath it that supplies blood to it. And it's got 3 vessels. It's got a front, a middle, and a back. And for 2 hours, I had given this lecture on the blood supply, what it does, what are the symptoms associated with patients when they have damage to them. And you know, the students come to class. Getting medical students to go to class is often difficult, but they always came to my class, and then they would sit there, and it seemed like they're listening. So at the end of the class, I said, all right, here's a patient who has had an infarct, who has had an injury, and she's presenting in the ER. And I gave a list of symptoms, and I said, all right, what vessel got damaged? Front, middle, back. And I made up a 4th answer. I said some made up cerebellar artery. And we had the student response system. So now we use phones, but at the time we had something called an eye clicker. And when I asked the students the question, I got like 25% A, B, C, D. And when you get an answer like that, you realize it's just complete noise. The students don't know what the answer is. And I got kind of upset. And I kind of chastised the students, and I go, look, next year, you will all see this patient in the emergency room. This patient is a very common patient. You will see this very ubiquitously, and you need to know this answer. If you don't, you're going to hurt somebody. And the great thing about medical students is they're A personalities. And when you say it's going to be some points to their final grade, they do everything they can to find the answer. So I said, all right, this is going to be 5 points toward your final grade. Find the answer. And I let them work together in teams. And after a couple minutes, they figured out the answer. 80% of all strokes happen in the middle cerebral. So even if you don't know, you should have guessed that. And we went through, everyone got it right, and kind of left the classroom. And I left, and I got thinking, all right, there's only really 2 explanations that's going on here. One, all these students that are in our medical school are too dumb to understand a really smart guy like me. I mean, I went to Cambridge, and I went to Edinburgh, and I got all this pedigree. So maybe I'm just too clever for them. Maybe not the answer. And the real answer was, and this is a very tough thing for a faculty member to get across, what if I'm not very good? I'm entertaining. The students like coming to my class and listening to what I got to say. I get these awards, but I'm actually not teaching the students things they need to know. And at that moment in time, we changed the way we delivered the curriculum. I did. And luckily, I was dean at the time, so I was able to promote this change. And what we did was we taped our lectures. I used a tape recorder at the time. We were using Moodle. I tape recorded my lecture, and I told the students, all right, you guys just listen to this lecture, and then we'll come to class and work through clinical problems based on the lecture. This is before all the talks of flipped classrooms and all that stuff. This is more than a decade ago when I did this, and students loved it. And one of the things that happened is as we were doing this, and I was getting lots of students answer questions in class, I started collecting lots of data. And over time, this data became very large, and we got this very large chunk of data on how students did on the classroom sessions, how they did on exams. And when we started to look at the data, we started to see some really interesting items. We noticed that a lot of the students that did well in school, but were kind of on that risk profile, a higher risk profile, often came from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. That the students that had trouble in their freshman and sophomore year of university often came from different environments than maybe my sons went to. And what we came to the conclusion was that was because their high school really didn't prepare them sufficiently to enter in the university setting. So when they went to university, they were seeing chemistry, calculus, and biology for the first time. And so it took them a while to get their feet underneath them. But when we looked at the data, if we looked at their junior and senior year grades and kind of dismissed their freshman and sophomore grades, it had no bearing whatsoever on our admission. The second thing we noticed is that the verbal score on the MCAT really had no bearing on how well a student does or does not do in medical school, or how their predictive models we're looking at. And so we put all this stuff into a package. And what we did was we created this predictive model. So because we have medical students, we're able to collect this data over a time period, and we track them over time. And if the student gets the question correct, we kind of give them points towards it. And if they get it wrong, we take those points away, and we track them over time. And because we know what the students are going to get on the boards, because we have a large data pool, we're able to predict what they do on the boards. Now, we coupled that with the MCAT and the GPA, and we realized we were able to validate, and there's some white papers out that you can read about, we were able to validate that the freshman and sophomore GPA and the MCAT had no predictive value whatsoever on how well a student does on the boards. And that's when the epiphany kind of hit. It's like, hey, wait a second. We're selecting students generally from upper socioeconomic backgrounds. And this is corroborated by when we look at the LCME data. When we look at data from medical schools, the average parental income of a medical student is almost $300,000 a year, way above the mean of the United States. But when we look at our school, our average parental income is $40,000, and our board scores is just as good. It's because we have a better way. This master's program is a better way for us to be able to predict how the students do. Now, here's the reality. If you're sitting here listening to me talk, you're probably a high risk student. If you got a 520 on the MCAT and a 4.0 from Harvard, you're probably not listening to me talk right now. You've probably already been accepted. But if the grades weren't so good, or maybe you didn't do so well in the MCAT, you're probably listening to what I got to say. And what I would tell you is, don't be afraid to apply. Do a program like this, do a master's program. And the reason why we created this master's program was to give students a second chance. And you're a high risk student, right? We're not going to beat around the bush. But if you can prove to us that you can do well in this course, we're going to bring you into the medical school. And this is going to be what the course is. The MSMS course is exactly the same as the first year of medicine. You take the same anatomy class, you take the same biochemistry, the same physiology, the same pathology. You're taking it at the same time as the medical students, the same timeline, the same pathway. And medical school in and of itself is not hard, one class at a time. What makes it difficult is a whole bunch of courses thrown at you at the same time, and you have to learn how to triage it. So because we have a medical school and we have this predictive model on how the students are doing, we're able to track how you would do compared to medical students. And because we're able to do that, we're able to see if you will or will not pass the boards. And what we find is about 30 to 40% of all the medical students that we take into this program. Now remember, they've all been turned down from other medical schools. We find that those students are going to do very well on the boards. And so we bring them in to our medical school. And that is how we have been able to drive our board scores up so high. So you got a 520 and you got a 4.0 GPA, go to Stanford. But if you're not that student and you're trying to find another pathway, a new pathway in the medical school, this is how we're doing it. And there's a mission behind this, by the way. So we all know that there's a healthcare problem in the world, not just the United States, but globally. Everyone knows that most of the healthcare problems exist in communities of need, lower socioeconomic backgrounds or demographics. If we want to solve these problems, what we need to do is start selecting students from those areas. My guess is the majority of you are probably coming from those communities. And we need to find a way to kind of de-risk you to bring you in to the medical program. And what you're looking at here on the screen are some of the metrics that we use. So in essence, this is a master's student being compared to medical students and how they're doing in each of the courses and whether they will or will not pass the boards. And my ultimate goal is to have all of our medical students come from this pathway. We're not going to look at the MCAT. We're not looking at the GPAs. We're looking at this side of the element. Can you pass the boards? And are you going to go work in an area where we need healthcare workers? And so that's the general evolution of what actually occurred. So it's not something that just kind of came out of nowhere. It kind of took us time to develop it. Now, let's say these scores aren't where you want. They're not as good as maybe you don't get into medical school. We also have other pathways available for you to go there. And if you're in this passing range that we see here on the right, you might go into medicine, you might go into veterinary, you might go into dentistry, you might go into physical therapy or PA. But if it starts going a little bit lower than that, there are other pathways to look at. We got all the way down to device manufacturing sales, things like that. So we got a whole list of pathways that we're going to go through as we do this. The key thing to this, and it's really quite an important thing, 40% of the global GDP is related to healthcare. Almost all the jobs, the majority of jobs on this planet are related to some way for healthcare. It's not social services, it's not defense, it's healthcare. So what we're doing is we're creating an opportunity for these students, you, to come into a program to get a job, to be able to take care of your family, provide for a good life, and hopefully make it into the medical school or whatever program you would like to go do. So providing opportunities and pathways are really kind of the critical thing, what we're doing. And the reason why I'm excited about also the master's program here versus maybe post-bacs that you might be thinking about. Post-bacs don't give you a value proposition if you don't get into medical school. You're going to pay a lot of money, but putting a post-bac on your CV isn't really going to help you. The master's degree program at least gives you a degree you can become a teacher. A master's degree allows you to become a teacher in 26 of the states in the United States. It gives you a degree, a postgraduate degree, to allow you to move to the next level, maybe go on and do a PhD. So it provides you a pathway, not only for an academic side, but also for a job or whatever pathway you want to do. So the idea is letting us bring you in, train you up so that you can either move on to an advanced degree, move on into industry, or move on and do a PhD or become a teacher somewhere else. So it provides lots and lots of opportunities and pathways for you to get there. And the key thing, we call this value the Tiber performance value. And so what we know is if you start in September, by December, January time, I'm just going to say a stat here, we have an R value of about 0.8 to be able to predict how you would do on the USMLE STEP scores. Because the reality is all medical school deans want to make sure that you pass the boards and get into practice. That's our job, is to make sure you do that. So if we can de-risk you and show that you are going to pass the boards, that makes you a very valuable applicant for that medical school, because we know that you're going to pass the board. So we can get rid of all that other stuff and start looking at your quality of character, what you want to do, how you want to practice. And that's the whole purpose behind creating this master's program, is to allow students a second chance. And I'm going to just say one more thing, and I hear this from admission counselors all the time, or students mostly. Their freshman year, they get 3 C's. They get a C in chemistry, biology, and calculus. Usually they come from poor backgrounds. And some admission person at some school tells them, give it up, buddy, go do business. That's the worst advice. Most of these people don't even know what sits or goes on in our admissions committee. They've never sat in an admissions committee and what we're looking at. That's nonsense. You have to prove yourself. You have to want to do it. And by doing a program like this, it allows you to prove yourself to us. I sit on the admissions committee, or I used to sit on the admissions committee, and show that you can do that. And then we can start looking at the content of your character. on how you would be a doctor and not just some grade or some MCAT score. And by the way, most medical school deans know the MCAT score is useless. If you get a 520, it has some meaning, but if you're between 495 and 515, it has very limited, little predictive value whatsoever in how you would do in school. And so I think you're going to start seeing the weight and emphasis on that wane, and you're going to see things like what we're doing here become more prevalent in the marketplace. The key thing for us is we're first out, and we got some great partners helping us do that. And that's why it's really quite exciting. It's giving the students that second chance from their university. And Andy, I think that's about it, unless you got a ton of questions.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And, speaking about those second chances for students, and again, thank you for sharing more about the goals for the program. I'd love to hear from some of our panel about how this program has helped impact the career trajectory for some of our students. So Dr. Tatum, would you mind starting us off by sharing a little bit more or some stories of student success from your program at St. Xavier University?
Sure. So we have had, it's crazy to say, this summer is going to be our 9th cohort that is starting. And from pretty much every cohort, we have had somebody who has been accepted into a program. The great thing I can say about the program is, this might sound weird to say it's a great thing, but we actually help people sometimes change their minds. So in our very first cohort, kind of get a little teared up here. One of my babies, David Sode, one of the most amazing young men I have ever met. You guys have had a chance to meet David, I believe. Phenomenal person. He's going to go MD. He's now changed his mind, going PA. And he has been accepted to 2 PA programs, and he starts in the fall. He has been adjuncting for us, so we are very, very sad to lose him as an adjunct, but that is what is happening. We have had a student who went through the program, and before she even got her diploma, she had already been accepted to 2 vet programs and is now in vet school.
That's just crazy to me. I don't have to interrupt, but vet school is significantly more difficult than medical school to get into.
Yes,
and
sir.
to get accepted to 2 is just spectacular.
Right. She got accepted to 2, and then she actually contacted me to let me know that she kind of was walking around campus and she was telling other people, it's okay. Let me show you how we're going to handle this and survive. Because even though the curriculum isn't the same, the breadth and depth at which they were getting hit by stuff was. And while everybody else was freaking out, she's like, we've got this. Let me show you the skills. So I've got one right now. I feel like I shouldn't be naming names, but she's an adjunct for us right now, but she has currently had 6 interviews and 2 acceptances already. So it's another one of my babies. So
that's amazing. That's great. Thank you for sharing. I know Dr. Corazon, coming out of our program, Southern California University of Health Sciences, you guys have also had a number of students go on. So would you mind sharing a little bit?
Would love to. So we've only had 2 cohorts complete our program. We're quite a new university in the MSMS world. Within those 2 cohorts, we're proud to say we've had students accepted to PA programs, MD programs, and dentistry programs. I know I'm really happy. For one of the most proud things that I see with my students is, as discussed by panelists, is also research opportunities. So I've had students go to Johns Hopkins for research and become assistant research, either coordinator or on academic based research programs. We have one right now at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. My first world was research. I worked for the DoD and the VA through the Samuel Institute and the University of California, Irvine. So when I see that as well, there's two pathways. One is the clinical perspective, which I'm very proud of my students to approach that way. But one is really that strong research and changing the paradigm perspective. And so I encourage students who decide during their MSMS that they have a passion for research, and they're just intrigued by the health science world's changing, especially so quickly, to reach out to that pathway as well. And that MSMS gives them that really strong jump, whether or not they want to pursue their PhD. And so I highly encourage my students to do that and support that venture in their life. So we've had several students do that as well. I will always support that.
If I could just add one more thing, Andy, real quick, is one of the things I've noticed is, and I've been doing this master's program for a while, is it's those students that are coming from the master's program going into the medical program that are often the leaders. Just as Dr. Tatum said, is, hey, we've got this. You know, they've been through the ringers. Now, I want you to think back when you were a freshman at university, all that new experience, you're trying to figure everything out and do that. Now, when you go through this master's program and you're in medical school, you are that person that knows what to do. And so quite often these individuals are the class presidents, the student reps. I think 2 of the last 5 valedictorians that we've had have come from this program. And what I find amazing of this is these are all students that got turned down by every medical school in the United States. And now there are class presidents, there are reps, there are valedictorians. That's the power of giving a student a second chance and letting them understand what it's going to be like to be a medical student and get that foundation underneath them so that when you do go into medical school, you can really concentrate on your studies and getting you to the place you want to go. So that's that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for all the feedback and for sharing as much as you have about the ways that this program can just be so impactful. I think with that, we're going to shift slightly and open up the discussion by asking our panel of experts a few questions just regarding their experience with the MSMS program and the current medical education landscape in general. So Dr. Lenahan, would you mind asking our first question?
Sure. So I'm going to ask Dr. Mir a question. What's the rigor of the curriculum like for that first year, that MSMS program? So what do you think?
That is a great question. The rigor and curriculum of the MSMS program mirrors that first year medical school. And that's the MSMS is the time to develop your study habits, make changes and adjustments to your study habits, form study groups, be able to take all the information that you're getting in MSMS, because you'll see it again in medical school. So you've heard the lectures, you've read the readings, you've taken the exams, you've worked in teams, you've done virtual labs and everything else, and the rigor will set you up for success. It's unbelievable the time that the students spend here on campus. They come early, they stay late, they have study groups here. But all this is just preparing them for the rigor that they're going to experience in medical school.
No, that's exactly. It's hard, but one of the things I find exciting about it is you're right. They form the groups, they do the work, and
right.
That's what life's about, really. I mean, that's really exciting to hear.
And I just had one student. She's at the end of her second semester, and she retook the MCAT already. And she said, she came in to see me the next morning, and she said, "You will not believe how well I'm going to do in anatomy, because everything that we covered in anatomy just helped me so much." She hadn't had anatomy and physiology before because it wasn't a prerequisite, so she didn't have it. But taking that anatomy class just gave her that extra boost that she needed on the MCAT.
So we'll go over to Dr. Tatum. For students pursuing healthcare but not sure what professional field they should move into, what options can they explore? You were just talking about that. I thought that'd be a good question for you.
Yeah. So one of the things that I love is we try to bring in a bunch of different opportunities for them. So we bring in PA, we bring in DO, MDs, because I find that a lot of our students, especially when they are first generation, when they come from different types of backgrounds, they are doctors in diapers, right? But they know that there are doctors and there are nurses, and that is the only thing that there is in healthcare. So we are trying to gather up every single opportunity that we can to expose them to the different types of professions that there are, and maybe turn them to the dark side, like PAs or something else, to allow them to know what there is out there for them.
And you know what, again, like I say, is those are all good, lifelong quality jobs. And
Right.
one's not necessarily better than the other. They're about enhancing the students' lives and giving them an opportunity.
Right. And it's finding that right fit, because it's what fits the best for that student when they have that aha moment, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, this is where has this been my entire life?
Well,
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit more on that, because that's really a big deal for me too. So I like that. So Dr. Corazon, students with lower MCATs or GPAs, should they still apply to medical school?
They should. I encourage my students to do so. Medical schools, just like us, we look at the totality of a student. We look at everything. I tell my students, real people will see your application. It touches a human being. And it does that for undergrads with the thousands of applications submitted to the University of California. I know it goes to a real human in admissions, and it touches their desk. That human will review your application. And we are complex. Your story is complex. And I encourage that story, who you are, what matters to you. That, Dr. Tatum said that first generation applicants, those that have never had a parent, grandparent, anyone in their family. These are the stories I get from my students. Dr. Corazon, I'm the first. And that to me, and their stories, I am the first, and I grew up in an area where I saw what it was not to have healthcare. I saw people die because they didn't receive the services that would have saved lives. I was at the forefront of that. I saw so many individuals die early in life because they didn't even know services were an option. And those are the ones that I encourage my students. Those are my public health students. Those are serve the people perspective. That's my passion. My doctorate was in health promotion and integrative healthcare services. So those specific stories, I say, my goodness, you've bought me in. I see your dream coming true. You bought me in. So you have to make sure they hear you. They hear you, because they need to know what and who you are. And so I would never discourage a student from applying, voicing out who they are. Of course, GPA matters. Of course, MCAT matters. But through my program, our National Board of Medical Examiners Part 1 self-assessment is a requirement to exit my program. I've got students where a 194 is a passing for their basic science. And I've had a student get a 189, 190 almost. So that student almost passed Part 1 and has not gone to medical school. And that exam is done the second year of medical school. So imagine having that on your application of saying, gosh, if I sat for my medical boards, I would have almost passed it.
So Dr. Corazon, one of the things I want to say is that I've noticed this a lot, that a lot of the students that are probably on this call are afraid. And when we talk to them, they've been told by some admissions counselor that they can't do it. They've been told by a lot of people. And so that negative approach kind of is pervasive. And so when it comes time to apply, when you go talk to students, a lot of them are like, well, I didn't apply. I was afraid to do it. if I can get one thing across, and as Dr. Corazon just said, make the application. If you don't get in, fine. But if you don't make the application, there's no way you can get in. Apply to more than one school. Don't just apply to one, apply to 5 or 10. And by the way, everyone does that. That is the majority of people apply to those, but don't be afraid. And this is also some importance. Don't be afraid to ask for help. If you need help on your application, whether it's financial, whether it's writing your essay, whether it's filling out the forms. We actually had a student we would have accepted, but they didn't fill out the forms on the application through the MCAS system correctly. So we couldn't actually take them until next year. The student didn't know they had to do that. Ask for assistance. We're here to help. We want to do that. That's part of what we're trying to do. So don't be afraid. Apply to a couple schools and make sure you ask for help, regardless of what it's about. And sometimes people are afraid to ask for financial assistance or something. I guarantee if it comes down to it, you don't have $50 to pay for that application fee. If no one else will, I'll pick up the fee. I mean, we want you to apply for that. Don't let that, and by the way, almost every school will waive it if you don't have it, but don't let that stop you from applying. Go on here. I'm actually really curious about this answer because I haven't had a chance to meet Dr. Osgood in person yet. So Dr. Osgood, what made you guys actually decide to do the MSMS program?
Yeah, great. The primary reasons people have already shared and talked about, which is the first thing is the significant competitive nature of the healthcare admissions process. Currently, at least in Minnesota, and this is most likely fairly similar to other states across the country, but it's 3 to 4% acceptance rates into the medical schools here in Minnesota. That's fairly low. So looking for competitive advantages to demonstrate to medical schools that you are not a risk, that you are going to succeed, you are going to be successful. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for students that, yes, can come and can pay the tuition, but once you're at that school, you're their investment. They want to make sure that you're successful. So if there's ways in which that you can demonstrate to them that you are going to be successful, they are going to look at you at a higher level than they are looking at other students. Because when you're, looking at names, dates, numbers, at some point in time, you do have to make that human decision on who do you think is going to be successful. And having a program like this in your academic portfolio that you can say, I've already done graduate level medical education. I've already done the equivalent of a first year of medical education. I'm the exact person that you're looking for. That creates an opportunity for you to, or for a medical school to be able to say yes to you. And the other big factor is need. We are soon to be, and currently are short of practitioners in the state of Minnesota. If you look at 10-year trends and the number of students that our institutions here in the state of Minnesota produce, it's not enough. So academic institutions are going to be looking to expand openings for students. And we want to make sure that we, again, have opportunities for students that may not have had that first chance to be able to get into, like you said, have that second chance. So we were super excited about bringing a program like this to Minnesota, which there were none. There's a post-bac undergraduate program in the state, but there's no graduate level programs to this level. So we wanted to be the first, and we wanted to give that opportunity for students to look at us as an institution and then use that as a catalyst for their future medical school education.
I'm going to follow up with that question just a little bit, Dr. Osgood. Think about when you were back in medical school and having taken biochemistry before you took biochemistry. I hated biochemistry, by the way. That was my worst class. But imagine having that foundation before you do that, or anatomy or the physiology, how that would have helped your studying and how much, would have changed the way you went about studying for exams or helping other people study for exams.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll shift it just a little bit, but it's the exact situation that you're talking about. Is that historically I taught quite a bit in our undergraduate athletic training program, and we would have students that would take that program that would be interested in physical therapy. Well, many of these classes were the same: rehabilitation, therapeutic modalities, therapeutic interventions, anatomy, biology, like very, very similar. And so sometimes they would ask the question of like, should they do the biology major versus the athletic training major if they're already going to get that information in PT school anyways? And my answer is wouldn't you rather come in ahead of the game? Wouldn't you rather come in kind of a little bit at the top of the class than learning this all for the very first time? And the students that did the athletic training option going into PT school would always come back and said, I am so glad that I did that because I instantly became the TA. I instantly was teaching my classmates what was going on. I instantly became that person that people came to because I had a previous, accelerated kind of background in that information. And while they were stressed and were really having it difficult their first semester, it was a piece of cake for me. And that set them on a great trajectory for the rest of their career, and it made it way more successful.
That's exactly. Now you are the person in the school with the foundation. You are the person, the students, as Dr. Tatum, and I'm going to get to her in just a second, was talking about. You are the person they're looking to solve the problems, and that's why you become the class president. That's why you become the next thing for that. And Dr. Tatum, I want to explore a little bit more when you said that student came back to you and said, "Hey, I got this. Don't worry about it." That is a very powerful statement. Here is a student that probably was always behind the curve, that academic career, trying to struggle and get up the ladder. And now they're at the top of the ladder, being the person people are looking for. That is a very powerful statement for that student, like for just your own self-esteem.
Yeah, I see it with a lot of our students when they come in, they lack self-esteem. They're very slow to answer anything. And by the time they're done with their first semester, and definitely by the second semester, they're a lot more confident in themselves. And I tell them all this. I tell them, and please don't get offended by this, but the information that they learn from the classes isn't even the most powerful thing that they get from this program. Gesundheit. The most powerful thing that they get is going to be what they learn about themselves and how they learn to manage. And as you said so well, Dave, triaging and being able to figure out how to balance and do this work-life balance thing and be successful. And then they realize that they can do it. And they have so much more confidence in themselves. And then that just builds upon it. And then you just see them blossom into these beautiful things. I tell them it's like making a butterfly. It's a horrible, painful process. And that caterpillar has to be beaten down into a pulp before it can become a beautiful butterfly, but we make them into beautiful butterflies.
Excellent analogy. Thank you. That self-esteem, that self-confidence is really a critical part of what we're trying to do as that process of de-risking the students. For Dr. Corazon, is this program offered online? I know you guys are doing it online, so tell us a little bit about that process and what that's like.
Right. Ours is, we have two models. We have an online, which is all online perspective, but they do need to meet with faculty once a week, and they do take their exams that's proctored. So that's something that's important for students to know. When we say online, it is online. Those are for my working students or part-time. We call it the part-time program. But it doesn't mean that you're completely off on your own, because it can get scary as well for coursework that's mimics the first year medical school. It doesn't mean that we just let you go and you're all on your own, online. That's not how it works. But we do have another model as well. We call that the hybrid model. And the hybrid model is what we call a high flex model. The high flex model is student centered. And the perspective of that is the student is in the, flipped classroom model in person or can stay remote through the Zoom program. Again, we're a little different like that because of California. We stayed regarding California requirements, and we've kept that so far. And summer term is a shorter term. It's only 5 weeks, which is really nice about our program. I think for everybody, all our programs are similar. I could be wrong. Rachel, am I wrong? Everybody gets the short 5 weeks summer for hybrid, correct?
Correct, yes.
I think it's beautiful. It's a great model for all the programs because it allows our student to get a breather for the hybrid program because it's such an intense coursework. That 5 weeks allows my students to shadow during the summer term, which is really great. It allows them to look into research or secondary advancements. This is where I encourage them to reach out to faculty for letters of recommendation, improve their MCAT scores by taking coursework or MCAT prep courses. This is really the time for them to excel using that summer term to do so. So yes, we have several different models of learning, and we encourage it all. We certainly understand the difficulties students have in their learning pathways.
Just like we talked about, you build the education model to fit what the students' needs are, what their experiences are. I want to move to Dr. Muir and talk a little bit about Jacksonville as an area, and I know that is a huge area that has a problem with healthcare workers. And so what, in that part of Florida, what does this type of program mean for your university, for the community, for the students' opportunities? What have you been able to see?
Well, I tell you, I'll tell a little story. I was at an undergrad event and I was talking to a senior, and we were talking about her major was biology. And I said, are you going into medicine? She said, yes, that she wanted to be a physician. And I said, oh, that's great. And I was telling her about the MSMS program. We had just started at the time, and we were just started our first cohort. And when I told her what the program was for, it was, set you up for success in medical school. And she had a rough start. Life happens. We have life events, and she had some life events when she first started her undergrad program. And that made her GPA a little lower. So she wasn't really ready to apply to medical school yet. And those are the students that we really want to reach out to, especially here in Jacksonville, especially at our own universities, surrounding universities, to prepare them and give them the leg up. All these opportunities that everybody's been talking about for the last hour, set them up for success, get them ready to apply to medical school or dental school, physician assistant school, pharmacy school. I think that her story really, it made me feel really good that Jacksonville University was able to participate in an MSMS program.
Excellent. And one of the things I like what you said there is it prepares the student not only for medicine, but for pharmacy, dental, ophthalmic, physical therapy, any one of the health disciplines. Because you get that first year of medical school, you're kind of being inundated with a lot of information. It really prepares you for anything like that. Andy, I don't know if we want to take, I think we're going to run out of time here. Do you want to take some questions from?
You read my mind. So I think if we could shift gears slightly, we have had some questions that have come in throughout the presentation in the chat. I will read out the questions, and then feel free, anyone on the panel is welcome to answer them as we receive them. And for those who have questions but haven't typed them into the chat, now is a perfect opportunity to do so. All right, so first up, should students with low undergraduate GPAs take the MCAT, then apply to medical schools and MSMS programs and see which they are accepted to, or just focus on the MSMS? Any thoughts?
Well, I think all of us might have some different thoughts. I'll tell you mine, and someone might have another. If you have a low GPA, that probably means that you struggled early on in your freshman and sophomore year. If you're thinking about applying to medical school, you probably picked up your grades as you move through and you're able to show yourself. I would recommend you take the MSMS. And the reason is what we talked about. It gives you that foundation. It gives you the support that you're going to need when you go to medical school. Remember when you went to university and that freshman year, you're trying to figure everything out? That could be why your grades weren't so good. You don't want to have that experience in medical school. You want to go to medical school ready to go, ready to get going. And so you can be the leader of that class and get that information. The MCAT, you can take that before or after. That doesn't necessarily matter. You want to do well on it. But the key thing is 1 year is not going to make a big difference in a lifetime of being a physician. All right. I know it seems like a big deal when you're 23. It was many decades ago when I was 23, and I know what it's like. But get that foundation, get that support, and then apply. If you're the student that we just described, that's what you need. That's my opinion. And I'll let, if anyone else wants to opine.
I'll just piggyback off of that. I like to tell all of my students the best time to apply for fill in the blank professional school is when you are the best qualified applicant. And none of the students that I've run into at this point in time have an expiration date on them. So you have time. Make sure that you're qualified, because you don't want to keep applying and keep applying and keep applying, because once you apply to a medical school, by the 7th time, they're kind of like, right? So make sure you're really well prepared the first time. If you have to apply a second time, dude, that's cool. But you don't want to keep doing it and just be like, maybe this time. Do it well the first time.
I concur with both the other panelists' discussions. I for sure, as Californian, for sure. My suggestion also, I know it's tough to get rejection letters, and there are cycles, and I completely agree with Dr. Tatum that you don't want to apply too many times, though there's a though. Healthcare is a service. Healthcare is a service career. It's the give. I almost say you're going to call of arms. The other major pathway that's very similar to healthcare, I feel like it's people who go to outer space, is astronauts. The pathway to that is quite difficult. And there are very few people who get to see Earth from that view. With that said, the person who spoke at my advisor's retirement when he got the major award at the University of California, Irvine, I was very proud to attend it, was an astronaut. It was astronaut Steve Smith, who's from Berkeley. He's from Northern California and went to Stanford and got his doctorate degree there. He was rejected from NASA 4 times before he was accepted. And he brought all those letters. He really showed it. It was hard for him to do so, but he was very proud. He said he's extremely proud of those rejections. It took him 30 years to be able to fly in space. I'll put the thing on an article about him. It takes true grit, quote, true grit. And I encourage my students to have that true grit within you. It's a drive and passion, because healthcare is a service. It is not about you. It's about the people you serve, which are your patients. And if that's not your pathway, you're in the wrong business. I tell them public health, and they go, Dr. Corazon's telling me I'm in the wrong profession. If you don't believe that, you are in the wrong profession.
So Andy, let's maybe do a couple more questions. We want to run out of time.
Sure. This is a great one. Does anyone have any tips for students struggling to have letters of recommendation? This person has shared that for them, the last 2.5 years of college were online, so making those connections were a little difficult. I'm not sure if my first or second year professors that met me in person even remember me at this point. So when applying to this program, any tips for letters of recommendation?
let's let Dr. Osgood answer that since he's a new one at the table here, and we've all been through COVID. So I'm actually curious to hear his answer on this. So it's a very good question.
Well, as an individual that has taught a lot of online classes, I'll just say that just because you teach online or you take a class online doesn't necessarily mean that the faculty or the students don't want to have personal connection. And it's one of the benefits of technology is that it still allows for some personal connection. Now, in a traditional format, what that would look like is you would sit in class. After class, you would chat a little bit. You'd raise your hand. You might stop by office hours with the faculty and just kind of do that normal chit chat. And that's how you build the rapport. In an online format, it just takes a little bit more initiative. I doubt there's many faculty that wouldn't love to do a short, 30 minutes or, 60 minutes, a one-on-one conversation for you to tell them about your kind of hopes and dreams and goals, show them kind of your record of academic achievement, tell them what you're kind of hoping to kind of achieve, ask them if they'd be willing to be a reference and provide that recommendation. Most faculty do this because they, again, love the connection with students. And when we've gone to this online format, we've lost some of that with our ability to connect. So if a student reaches out and says, hey, I really want to actually have that connection, it can be via Zoom call, phone call. Most would love to do that. And if they're not willing to do that, you probably don't want them writing a reference for you. So find that person that actually is, certainly willing to. Now, in addition, certainly there are professional letters of recommendation that are good as well. So be thinking about what type of extracurricular activities are you doing that could, that could benefit that. We have lots of students that take jobs of scribes, lots of students that volunteer, with assisted living facilities. Those types of connections and opportunities create avenues for you to get letters of recommendation. But in terms of just straight up academic of your professors, reach out to them. They would be more than happy to provide some feedback.
I not only do I 100% agree, one of the things I would add to that is don't be afraid to ask. They're not going to write it for you out of the blue. You have to go ask. And a lot of times getting over that hump, that self-confidence, that self-esteem we were just chatting about, don't let that get in the way. Make that call. And I want to ask Dr. Muir, because I know he's written a few letters of recommendation in his time. So what would your advice be to a student?
I have written quite a few, and I've written a lot for my online students as well. So I totally agree with everything that was said. I think the main thing is, instead of just, especially if you haven't seen them in a while, do that introductory letter and say, this is my plan, and I'd like to discuss with you the possibility of you writing a letter for me. Can we set up a time to meet and discuss? So that way that they can make the letter a little bit more personable, a little bit more kind of jog my memory to who you were and what class you took and what's your goals and what's your plans and everything like that. So I really think that developing that groundwork, having that meeting and that discussion can get you a much better recommendation than just sending somebody an email. Oh, would you please write me a letter of recommendation for XYZ? So
that's great advice. No, that actually, that's what you take that snippet out and record it for other students. That's some great advice. So, Andy.
Yeah, thank you. Next question up is, what is the difference between a post-bac and an MSMS degree?
So I guess I'll answer that again. The post-bac degree is often to get you coursework that you haven't had in your undergraduate. So if you were a different type of major and you haven't had a biology course, you could take a biology course, or you can repeat a biology course. And often the post-bacs are offered by schools that have a medical school, and they're trying to get a weight of how you would do. The MSMS program that we offer, the difference is that the program is 1 year is exactly the same as medical school. So we're not gearing it towards whether or not you had a biology class in university. We're assuming that, and we're getting you to understand how you would do as if you were a medical student or a post-professional health science student. And so we're doing that. The second thing I would say that's the big difference is the MSMS degree gives you a postgraduate degree that you can put on your CV to allow you to get another job, to go on to secondary postgraduate education. It allows you something else to be able to do. The Post-Bac degree is just a Post-Bac degree, and it doesn't really have any academic equivalence when you go out into the marketplace to use it. And so that was one of the big reasons why we made it a master's program, was because it had a value, an academic value attached to it, where the Post-Bac did not. And so that was a big deal. And for our MS, I mean, there's other master's programs out there. The main difference between us and everybody else is this is exactly the first year of medical school. You're going to know right away whether you can or cannot do it, right? Because it's you. If you make it, you know you can make it in any medical school, any other health school in the world. And that's the key thing. We're letting the students get that confidence, that self-awareness to be able to do that. And if anyone else wants to kind of make a comment on it, that's the big difference to me.
I just think an additional factor is to always consider financial aid implications. Once you get your undergraduate degree, it kind of puts you in a slightly different category for taking additional undergraduate courses, where if you transition into a master's program, there's a whole bucket of opportunities for, funds and things to be able to access. So just always kind of talk to a financial aid advisor at your institution, because it does matter, and there can be implications that make the MSMS program an advantage.
Beautiful.
Great, thank you. I think we've got just a couple more questions here. This is a great one. This person writes, I'm currently working in a completely different field than medicine. I'm 24 years old and I'm looking into making a career change. Do people making career changes succeed in these MSMS programs?
All right, so I'm going to actually kick that over to Dr. Tatum. That sounds like her type of question. So we'll let her answer it.
So I have had some degree changers, and this actually kind of piggybacks off of the previous question. We have a list of courses that we require people to make sure that they have before we allow them into the class. If we have degree changers, so I've had a couple of people who were business majors, then they go into our post-bac program. They take our required courses. Anatomy and physiology are the first two that I require. I want to make sure also that you've had some biochem, which means you have to have organic chemistry, because your first semester, if you're not starting in the summer, you're going to be taking anatomy, physiology, and biochem. I love, totally fangirl crush on the person who teaches anatomy, but she will eat your lunch if you are not prepared. Okay. So I want to make sure that people have anatomy, that they have a physiology background. I want to make sure that my kiddos are prepared. So to make a short story long, yes, you can be successful. I just want to make sure that you've got the basics so that you're going in prepared and well armed to be able to handle whatever's thrown at you.
So I'm gonna throw something out there. This is not statistical. This is no evidence other than ancillary from what I've seen. I've had 2 concert musicians have a transition change into medical school. They were the best students I've ever seen because they could focus. If you got an ability to focus and you've somehow figured that out, that you can sit down for 3 hours and study a topic and not get distracted by your phone or something else. And a lot of times these career changers, those are the people we're talking about. It makes you an exceptional person to have this type of change. And because at first I thought, this one was a concert violinist at the Met in New York, and she came and top students. I was completely shocked by it, but 100%, I think that's a good path.
Okay, great. I think one final question, we are getting a number of questions that are really specific to individual student situations and pathways. And for that, I would certainly encourage everyone to reach out to any one of our partner schools that are currently offering the MSMS degree and speak about individual situations and application requirements as well. So for our final question, let's see here. This person writes, I have done some courses through my undergrad, but I still need several courses to finish, and I haven't taken the MCAT yet. Should I finish the courses and then apply without the MCAT, or should this person take the MCAT before applying to an MSMS?
Why don't we let Dr. Muir give his opinion on that?
Thank you. I would go ahead and take my courses. Concentrate on those, get those knocked out of the way, apply to MSMS and get into MSMS. And at the end of your first or the end of your second semester, if you feel like you want to go ahead and take MCAT, then go ahead and take it. And you can take it again. I mean, you can take it more than once, but I would go ahead and be prepared and get those classes knocked out and take the classes that's going to help you do well on the MCAT. Anybody else have a
And Dr. Corazon, I know you guys have lots of courses there at Southern Cal too. So what do you think?
Right. We have the accelerated sciences courses at SCU. So piggyback on those comments. Yes, we have requirements for our courses, ways that students can improve. And so we have those options at SCU because we're a health sciences university. So any interested students, please feel free to reach out to me or the admissions team at SCU or any of the wonderful individuals here, Rachel Perry, Andy Jackson. We will be able to help you with those types of questions and issues.
Okay, wonderful. With that, I know we're slightly after the hour, so thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Dr. Lenahan and our panel of experts. We truly hope everyone found the time valuable and have walked away learning more about this new pathway to medical school and a little bit more about the MSMS degree program. If you still have questions that you'd like answers to or would like to learn more about our partner institutions who are offering this program and how to apply, we would encourage you to start your journey by visiting our website at msms.tiberhealth.com. All of our partner institutions are represented there, and we can help get you in contact with a representative who can ensure that all of your questions are answered. So with that, thank you all for attending and have a wonderful day.